Hey guys, it's the Captain here, and today is a cool day because ever since I got this bad boy at the NAMM show in 2017, a lot of you have been saying, would you compare it to this bad boy, which I've owned since the end of 2014? And so more about those in a second. But it also has sparked a bit of an idea for a new show that Danish Pete and I have been chatting about doing, which we may call Head to Head or Top Trumps or something like that. Probably can't call it Top Trumps. I think someone else has got that name. Where we compare two guitars and we kind of shoot them out in like a Top Trump style, you know, give them a rating for different characteristics or whatever. So if you like the idea of that format, and it won't be me doing those videos, it'll be much better guitarists than me, Pete, Rabir, all those kind of things. Comment about whether you think you'd like just playing or more information, subjective stuff from the guys about which one they felt nicer or whatever you want to do. Just comment in the section below. But for now, this is very much a head-to-head kind of video of the PRS Singlecut 594 versus the Gibson 1958 reissue. I'm going to start with the Gibson because this is the one I've owned the longest. So what is this? This is Custom Shop. I bought it in 2014 and it's pretty much what they would currently call now the standard historic spec. In fact, it's not even pretty much, it just is the standard historic spec. The 58 typically would have come with a fairly plain maple top, so this has probably got a little bit more flame on it than maybe like a regular 58 would have. But if you wanted the crazy kind of flames that you can get on this guitar, you would have to either do a Gibson made to measure, like in other words a custom built Gibson 58 with and then spec that you want like a super flame top, or you might decide that you want to buy a 59 Les Paul, which is pretty much the same as this, just with a slightly sort of different neck carve and a more flamey kind of top on it. But this is standard historic. Money wise, both these guitars are going to set you back somewhere around about the £4,000 mark. Don't know what that is in dollars. Well, I do know what that is in dollars, but I don't know what these cost in dollars in America or wherever you live, but they are similar kind of dough. Obviously, the idea on the Les Paul is it's as authentic as it possibly can be to a 58. As far as I'm aware, some of the dyes and the glues that they use, certainly the plastic parts, things like that, are not as they would have been back then, but I guess they're, those are all fairly minor details. It is a 2 humbucker guitar. Sorry for the, everyone's going, duh, obviously. These are what are called custom buckers. So these, there is no sort of official spec for these other than they are wound to be typical of what kind of humbucker would have been on an original 58. If all you Gibson historians out there will know that before, a computer would work out how many winds were going on the pickups here in 58, they varied all the way through. So this is just kind of like a representation of something typical. Doesn't do anything clever. There's no push-pull switching here. It's just a straightforward rhythm, treble, in between setting, 2 volumes, 2 tones. It is a 24 3/4 inch scale length, rosewood fretboard, everything, maple top, mahogany neck and body, oldie-fashioned Clusen style tuners on it. And it sounds like this. So we're using a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe with some pedals on the floor, but I'm not going to change the settings as I switch between guitars. Now we'll get into some more dirty tones and extended tones and stuff, but for comparison, just to get underway, this is pretty much as of now the latest guitar to hit the PRS collection. It's called the Singlecut 594. It is clearly to date probably PRS's closest nod to the Les Paul, but there are some sort of key differences. It is a mahogany body, mahogany neck, set neck joint, although you can see again the neck carve is maybe a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more formed to the hand. It has a rosewood fretboard. It has a flame maple top. Now this is what PRS called a 10 top, so more flame than you might get on a standard version of this. It has this sort of hybrid set of tuners, really. They kind of look vintage from the back with the open sort of cog mechanisms, but they are locking tuners on the front. I've restrung both these guitars with my current preferred string gauge of choice, which I have a handy coaster here to show you. I'll go to this camera. So these are 11 to 48 Ernie Ball power slinkies, just the regular power slinky set, not the cobalts or anything like that. So both these guitars got the same strings on them. The switching on the PRS is a little bit more sophisticated because I now have the coil taps or coil splits on the humbuckers, so I can get full humbuckers or single coil sounds out of this. The pickups are a take on the very popular 5815 set that PRS have been using recently on a lot of guitars, but they've done what's called a low turn version of it, so less windings, so less output from the pickups. The name 594 derives from the scale length, which is 24.594 inches long. So very slightly shorter than the Gibson, which should mean that there's a little less tension in the strings. In other words, the strings should be a little easier to bend when tuned to pitch. And we are tuned to concert E tuning. Other than that, you know, we're looking pretty similar. You know, we have a separate bridge and tail piece, albeit again they are aesthetically different on the PRS. My Gibson is in the VOS finish. VOS stands for Vintage Original Spec, I think, or something like that. Vintage Original Spec. Anyway, it just basically means that somebody has taken probably the sort of the gloss off of what it would have looked like when it was brand new. So it kind of looks a little bit pre-aged without it actually being damaged. PRS don't really do that, so PRS have just gone full shininess. The lacquer again is a little different. So Gibson's is the same kind of nitrocellulose finishing that they've been using, from the early days with these guitars. The PRS is a very thin lacquer, but it's not quite the same. It probably feels more like a polyurethane kind of lacquer, but I'm led to believe by PRS it's massively thinner than the typical kind of polyurethane lacquers that you get on say modern Fenders or cheaper guitars, which should allow the body to resonate a bit more, but it is harder wearing than the Les Paul, the nitrocellulose finish. So don't expect to see any of that kind of natural kind of wear and tear that you would get on the Gibson or on a guitar with a nitro lacquer. Anyway, same sounds, just through a different guitar. Spank it. Let's get into some just a little bit of like a feel thing. The neck carve on the Les Paul is famous really for being, you know, one of the fatter calves that you'll get on a guitar. And that's probably true. I spent, you know, probably the first 20 years of playing guitar avoiding fat neck guitars, because I must have picked one up when I was, you know, literally just learning to play and found them uncomfortable to play. And then I had this kind of moment when I picked up a fat neck guitar and spent 5 minutes with it and just went, actually, you know what? I quite like this. And I've kind of been a fan of fat neck guitars ever since. So I've always preferred the sort of the 58 over the 59, just from a feel point of view. But it's quite narrow this way. So quite narrow, you know, in terms of a fretboard width, fairly chunky front to back, but it's got that really nice kind of, it feels like it sits in your hand nicely. The PRS has something called a pattern vintage carve, which is their kind of fattest, you know, front to back, but it's still a smidgen wider, or at least it feels a smidgen wider. I don't really want to get into sort of specs of the, you know, it's by the millimeter what it is. I'm sure you can find all that online if you want to, but it just feels a little bit wider. Still very much that kind of, you know, comfy fit in your hand, but, you know, the string spacing's a little wider. It's probably a little bit more like, what's it more like? You know, maybe the neck width feels a little bit more Fendery. I don't really know, but it definitely feels like, particularly if you're like a thumb wraparound player here, that maybe it doesn't feel quite the sort of the glove fit that I've gotten used to on the 58. In terms of weight, they're about the same. Guitars like this are going to vary, you know, quite considerably, I would have thought, just depending on the density of the wood that gets used. So if you ever, you know, go try these guitars in stores, compare them, or head on over to the Andertons website, and what we do is we photograph and weigh each of these guitars individually from stock, so you can kind of see what you like. But I wouldn't, I vaguely remember when I bought this one, it was like middle of the road. It wasn't terribly light or terribly heavy for a Les Paul. It was just sort of in the middle, and this sort of feels, in fact, if anything, this feels a little bit lighter, but not dramatically. If you are what's the right word when you're something for details, if you're a real kind of stickler, that's what it is, a stickler for kind of detail and finish, PRS is going to win that battle every day. The Gibson is built using, you know, oldie-woldy techniques. There is bleed from the die into the binding. You know, you can feel the ridge between the binding and the body. You know, just generally speaking, like the edging on the frets and stuff will not be of the same standard in terms of attention to detail that the PRS will be. I don't want to make that as like a criticism of Gibson. I just think it's authentic to how the guitar is built, and it is what it is. Anyway, let's put some distortion on, and I'll do a loop as well so that you can kind of hear a jam of the two over the top. So I've got a full tone plimsoll here with the settings. Ooh, what have we got? We've got the gain at about a quarter of the way up, and we get this. we should probably do some sort of utterly unscientific sustain test. So maybe I'll just play an A chord and let it ring until it stops ringing, and you guys can decide which you like the best. I've got a boost pedal on the floor here as well, a Tim Yawadnig luxury drive thing. I'm probably just going to use for the loops. So for now I'm going to stay fairly, not too much gain. But anyway, here we go. Anyway, so it sustains for a long time. Let's do the same test on this one. Bit pointless, I know, but it's fun. I think it's probably fair to say that you could sit with both these guitars and have that kind of very quiet decay for days. When I'm playing these acoustically, it feels like the PRS is sustaining for longer naturally. The guitar feels like it's resonating more and aiding that sustain for longer. Maybe that's just me. So look, what else can I really tell you? I mean, I'm obviously very lucky to own both of these guitars, and I don't really know what I would do if somebody said, you know, that's it, one guitar for the rest of your life. Because I've always kicked back at that and gone, I think you could custom make me something, you know, to every spec that I could ever dream of. And if that was the only guitar I could ever own, I would eventually become bored of it and find that it didn't inspire me anymore. So I suppose the sort of the cop-out answer to that is really, I think I want both. If I had to be, you know, what's not to like, just, you know, if you've got a 58 Les Paul, you've got a piece of rock history. It is a guitar that all my guitar heroes, or most, you know, 90% of my guitar heroes all played something like that and got killer sounds out of it. And I love this guitar to pieces, and I've owned it longer, which probably means I'm a bit more sentimentally attached to it. But this is just, you know, a perfect, it's just PRS being PRS. They're just sort of going, well, I like that Les Paul, you know, but I'm just going to physically keep doing weird little tweaks and things to it until eventually I come up with something that just is better, in inverted commas. I hate that word better. Shouldn't be allowed when we're talking about guitars. But, you know, if you take the sort of, if you take the objective elements of the build and everything, and the, you know, you would accept that probably this is just better. I hate that word, so not going to use it. Throw it away. Ignore me. So anyway, there you go. Let's have a little loop jam. The first little bit of the solo I did without the boost, and the second bit of the boost. So both kind of sets of little jams there were effectively using the same pedals, same settings, same everything. What do you think? What do you think? You know, I'm just the lucky guy that gets to take both these babes home. Yeah, never happens any other time. I can tell you that. So there we are. That was our pilot episode of something called Head to Head or Top Trumps or something like that. Please comment below on what you liked and what you didn't like, and next time a better guitar player will come along and do a better job. For now, I've been the captain. Kapow! See you next time.